we're about to have a serious conversation. So, oh, what happened? Your recording stopped. Five. So, self control, right? What is it? What is the recipe for self control? What is the recipe for self control in a marriage? What's the recipe for self control in fatherhood? What's the recipe for self control in fitness and in faith? Yeah. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Beth B Effect, where the vibe is unmuted, unafraid, and unapologetic. I'm your host, Beth. And tonight we have our guest back, Chef Dennis. Of course, he's a chef, so who better to ask what's the recipe for all these things? What are the ingredients that he incorporates in his life as a man, right? That allows him to have this self discipline where he can make better choices. Because choices determine the outcome, sometimes in an input that applies to the factors that deal with our lives, that put us in a space where a good decision can spread out great things, or a bad decision can cause havoc, right? And we reap the consequences of those actions. So you guys know the Chef Dennis is not a guest to this show. This is his second time on. I truly appreciate you for coming on the back, coming back again by popular demand, right? So went through your background last time. We shared with everybody what it is that you do, how long you're doing your job. We know that you're married, that you're in fitness. So we're going to start tonight's session, right, about the recipe for self-control in a marriage, in fatherhood, in fitness, and in faith. And we're going to cover all those spaces that make you who you are, right? Because you're the recipe of this person who is able to navigate life through this moral compass that keeps you in good standing. So when did you realize self-control would determine direction of your life?
Self-control is when I was maybe like 19. Before we get into my self-control, let's talk about the seed that was sowed in me. So that's how I got to self-control.
We're gonna get there. That's where it's gonna lead. It's definitely gonna lead there. It's gonna lead to your self-control. So when you tell us about your self-control, like when did you figure that out? When did you determine that this was a requirement for you to be who you are? Because we got four different pieces of you that we need to discuss: marriage, fatherhood.
That's where self-control. Look, self-control started then when I became a father.
Okay.
That's because I had to be able to discipline my children, my daughter. That's okay. I had a daughter first. So I had to that's when self-control began. Because I know if I didn't have boys, I had daughters. And so I couldn't just yell at them. I had to have control about when I had to discipline them and tell them, they're not doing something right. Not with the yelling at them, but at a moderate voice. And so that's when self-control really started for me, being a father, right there. Everything else before then, it was wild out. So now it's what it was, wild out.
So what about fatherhood? So you said you got daughters, right? Because there are men that are watching. There are men that are probably going to join the live at some point. And where men, right, because men take advice from other men, right? I'm not saying they don't take advice from women. But even in the space where you became a father, you say you had daughters, because you did mention I have sons, I had daughters. So, like, what's the difference? Had you had sons, what would have been the difference? Why was it so important for you to maintain self-discipline as a father of young women?
All right. Growing up, I had brothers. Now I have a sister. So if I had a son, I would discipline him just like my dad disciplined me. But now that I had God allowed me to have daughters, so I had to learn how to discipline them in a way that wouldn't be, so how can I say, so manly. I had to be soft with them. but I had the discipline, and so my discipline for a son is totally different. We probably spank our sons. If they don't listen, we probably spank them,
Right.
and so that comes natural. But what happens is when you have daughters, you have to be mindful of how you talk to them, because if you talk to them correctly, then when they grow up, I mean incorrect, when they grow up, they think that's normal, yelling and
Okay.
cursing at them, calling them all type of names. They would think that's normal because they see their father. You are a man. A father is the first man that a daughter looks at. And so
Okay.
it depends on your character. It depends on how you speak to them, because that becomes a normal for them. And so when you always coming with them, even in the midst of disciplining them with, look, you can't do that. You got to stop,
Right.
and
Right.
not just yelling at them, because then a father yelling at his daughter all the time because they're not listening, she thinks that's normal.
So I know we discussed this last time, but your childhood, because your childhood kind of directed you to be the kind of father that you are. And the fact that you make a distinction between a son and a daughter, and you're saying that if you had a son, you would raise him a little differently. What part of your childhood says, again, nah, I'm not doing that to my daughters?
As a man, I could never spank my daughter. So I left that up to the moms. But when she stepped out of line, like she couldn't get upset and yell at her mother. No, that wouldn't be acceptable. You see what I'm saying? So
Okay.
I definitely would check her, like, yo, you're not gonna talk to her. Hold on, wait a minute, go back. You're gonna respect your mother. You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's the structure. That's how I told her. I was like, yo, you hold up, because when women get older, they start going through their little cycles, and they start bumping heads with
Yeah, we,
moms.
we, we, we do. We do. This
So
is, especially when
I had to
you're
rectify that.
16.
I
Right.
definitely was there to rectify that. So like, no, you can't do that. You can't listen. Yeah, you on your thing, but look, you gotta respect moms. So that was the structure. It's always about respect, and so that women should respect their dads. And so how did I build that up? Having a relationship with my own father, and so now that I have, you know, and that played a big part too. Having a
Right.
relationship, living with my father, and my dad taught me how to respect and honor, and so of course that you know correlate in my relationship with my daughter. So it was about respect. That was key, and so I really didn't have too many problems with her, but it's still, when she did step out of line, I was there, like, yo, you can't do that. So
So, are you saying that part of the recipe, right, that you put together to um, have you become this father that can support your daughter, your father, your relationship with your dad had a lot to do with that?
of course, I think that's the biggest part right there. When you say the recipe, that's the biggest part. Having my dad in my life and seeing how hard he worked, that was like putting a battery in my back. So it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Now when I have my own children, I was like,
Right.
okay. So my dad was a hard worker. I was a hard worker. You know, go out there, work, and come back home. I was engaged with my daughters. Like I played, laugh, joke with them, just like my dad did. So it was like a replica of what my father was to me.
Right.
So guess what? I did some of the things that my dad did to me. I did to my daughter, laughing, going out, staying out, going on trips, doing those type of things. So that build the relationship with my daughter, a good one. So I have a good relationship with my father. So I think that's the biggest part of the recipe right there, is having a relationship with your father, and teaching you how to be a father. Even though
Right.
there was no conversation about how to be a father, my dad never talked to me about how to be a father. I, he was the example, and so he was a good
Okay.
example of being a
Okay.
father.
So your dad, so watching your dad kind of helped you build the moral compass to be a father to your daughter.
Of course.
Do you feel like your family, the rest of your family, played a role in this too, or was it because here's the thing, right? We're in a space now where there are a lot of single parents. There are a lot of homes that are missing one parent or the other. And the purpose of this podcast is, of course, to describe lived experiences, right? Because some of us come from a space where we do have both parents, we have one parent. Sometimes we don't have a parent at all. Sometimes we just have a caregiver. But in the space where you did have your father, do you feel like, as a father, it's important and imperative to be in your child's life, whether they're a son or daughter?
Of course. Listen, when a child is born, they born with two parents. So it's imperative that both parents are in their life actively. And so
Right,
that plays a big part of how they develop their character. Having both parents. Yes, there are parents that are single parents.
right,
Yes,
right,
but let's just look at having one parent. But it's important to have that other piece because you got parents of two, so you need that other piece. Some people may say no, but you do because that's why you have parents. And
right,
so you have to develop. If let's just say the mother can't get along with the father, but still that daughter or that son still need that part of the development from the missing parent. So it's
right,
important. That's why you're supposed to have both parents in your life. And there are
right.
there are things where things happen and they're separated.
Because both parents have something to offer.
Right.
So,
It's
like
a
in a space where there's a female, right? You're raising your daughter. I'm in a space where I raised my son. I was a single parent for a while, and there were places where I could come to this point, like I can tell him, I could gear him in a space where I could say, these are the things that you can do as a man. These are the things that you can do as a person. But there was a time where I couldn't encourage him or support him in being a man. And that was a space where his father
right.
had to support him and give him the encouragement he needed to kind of put into gear that moral compass.
Right.
Earlier, I asked you if your family, because I know you have mom, you have, it's not just you. You have your mom, you have your dad, you have your brothers. Do you feel like your family contributed to adding pieces to this recipe that you've developed to be the person you are today?
Of course. Family. You know, one thing I tell people is community. It's big. That's big. It takes a village to raise a child. And what people don't understand that is because guess what? Sometimes mom and dad is so busy active. You might go to your aunt, you might go to your uncle. And if
Right,
they are, you know, in the space where they too have children and the mother and father together, you can see the love that they share, and then you be like, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. So you have
right,
examples around you that to show you what a family's supposed to look like, as far as loving families, not toxicity. Two
right.
parents loving on their children, even in the midst of them being disciplined, they still show love. They still show how it's supposed to look. So yeah, my family definitely played a part of that.
So, Beth B Shift is about being transparent and, unmuted, unafraid, and definitely unapologetic. We're in a space where somebody may look at this podcast and go, yeah, well, I didn't come from that kind of family and I'm okay. I didn't. And, not that we're saying that people have to. In this space, we're saying how important it is for both parents to be in the life of the child to offer support from different perspectives.
Of course.
And then your family was offering you support from different perspectives. You had your perspective from your mom, right? You had the perspective and the, discipline from your dad.
Right.
But sometimes, even when we're in that space, and we're going to get some marriage in a minute because, there are different pieces of you, there are different pieces of men. And that's what I want you to speak to tonight. I want you to speak to the pieces of men who can learn or build from where you are this time in your life based on the ingredients that you've used to build this recipe that you have to be the person that you are. So even though you had all this support and you come from this background, there were some lessons in life that kind of geared you in this direction because we come from the same background. We were in church. Our parents were who they were. We were in church 3-4 times a week. Singing in the choir, learning the Bible, and being responsible for doing devotional service. So there's a piece of us that's in that space. But when we became adults, we gravitated to different things in life. But there was a lesson. There were a couple of lessons that overtook us in that space. There were a couple of lessons that we had to learn from in order to use the things that our parents did give us so that we can be who we are today. What are some of the lessons that you learned, right, that encouraged you to be the father that you are? Aside from your father, aside from the discipline, aside from the examples, what did you learn outside of them in life that made you go, yeah, I'm going to be the best dad possible?
Well, like you said, there are some lessons that had to teach me how to be the man I am today. What the one I always say this to everybody that I speak to is being humble. I started a career, start making money, good money, and I let my job give me a big head. And so God allowed me to go through a situation where I was in a car accident. And my dad, prior to that, my dad asked me, like, "Oh, can like I said, I was getting a new place, new car, new marriage, all of that, right? So my head is big. I'm getting money,
Right.
getting that stack. And so my head get big, right? But in the midst of all that, I still was had a relationship with God, and that I was doing all those good things like that, right? And so my head was getting big. And so I got into a car accident. And so before I got into the car accident, my dad had some words, right? My dad was like, "Can I use your car?" It's like, "Nah, you can't use my car." Now, mind you, I said my head got big. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm getting all this money." Nah, you can't get my.
Right. I'm the man. I'm the man.
You know what I'm saying? No, you got dad. You gonna have to get your own car. But sure enough, I, this is me looking back now. You know what I mean? I'm telling you the story, but when I look back, it was pride. And so I got to the accident, ran into a dumpster, and only thing I think about was Jesus. It's called Jesus, 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 right? But now, mind you, I was able to see and hear and everything while I was able to breathe. So when I called Jesus the fifth time, hand on my chest, I was able to breathe. Now, mind you, I woke up. I woke up in a dumpster, car crashed. But then, guess what? As soon as I was able, I came to consciousness. I called my dad. It's like, "Dad, I'm in an accident." My dad stopped what he was doing. He was working on a job. Stopped what he was doing. Came straight to the hospital. Come to see me, all right. And when I look back at that story, I realized that God was teaching me how to not be prideful. And so that was one of the lessons that I learned in my life. Not to be prideful.
Right.
So that resonated with me, with my kids, not to have a big head because I'm, making good money, doing good, doing well, and never take it for granted because my life could have been snuffed out. And so I never look at life like I can't lose it. I've been in multiple car accidents. So, I value life, but I value it that because God has given me a gift, that gift that He gave me is gift of life. Because like I said, I've been in multiple car accidents, walked away, head-on collisions, walked away, no injuries, nothing. And so I value that. And so when I value that, when I look at it, I value my family. And so those values is important to me. And so that's why I'm the man that I am today, because I didn't let those incidents that happened in my life say, "Oh, that's a miracle." Nah. Some people say that's a miracle. Nah, that's God having His hand on me. It's not
Absolutely.
A miracle. They say, "Oh, that."
Well, let me ask you this, though, Chef. Let me ask you this. You just mentioned pride, right? Because we know pride is the biggest part of us that prevents us from being humble. Because sometimes God can bless us to put in spaces, and we aspire to different heights in life. Like you said, you were making money, you got a big head, but pride. So now you've learned these lessons, right? You have learned the lessons of how to be humble. You know that having a big head is not going to put you in a space where you can be humble. But pride is one of the things that kind of ruins our internal reputation, right? Because we could be in a space where we're like, oh, I'm gonna do that. But then pride will kick in and be like, yeah, no, we're too good for that. How do you maintain not being prideful? How do you maintain that?
My relationship with God.
In
Big time.
relationship?
I can't say I can't because that's how I've grown. I can't say anything else. I don't listen. How I'm not prideful is I know that's not what God called me to do. So I can't be that way because then everything He has given me, it can be snuffed out. So
Right.
put like this: when you said that, right, the first thing that came to my mouth, I mean, I said my mouth to my mind was this: just think about an apple. The apple could look so nice and good, right? But on the
Right.
other side of it, there's a hole. And in that hole, because the air has hit that hole, it rottens the apple. So that's the same thing. If you keep on, you have pride in your heart, guess what? It will rotten you. And so that's the same thing. So pride is something that can ruin everything in your life. So you want to remove
Right.
that. And so guess what? God, my relationship, allowed me to remove that out of my life. And that's
Okay.
pride can ruin anybody. That don't so there you go.
Anybody.
Anybody. It can
Any
ruin anybody.
situation, anybody, any
Anybody.
situation, it can ruin a lot of things.
That's right.
But we talked about
Relationships. Yeah.
absolutely, and that's where we're going next because I'm not going to say it's easy, right? I'm not going to say that it's easy to be a father and it's easy to discipline yourself in a space where you are the father of a daughter, but you're also a husband. So I want to get into that, right? For the people who are married, I recall a time where I spoke to a trusted friend, and we would always share conversations, and he would always tell me, Beth, you got to remember, men are visual. We can see this, we can see that. We can have a good woman at home. We can have a good woman. We can have a wife at home. But the moment we see something appealing to the eyes, something gets in us, and that thing makes us say, I need to have that. And then when you say, I need to have that, then you go on to, I want that. You're met with the challenge because now this frisque is doing what it do. Because if a woman is single, even if a woman is married, and I'm not tailoring this specifically to women. This is not about women being promiscuous and going after married men. This is not that. We're talking to Chef tonight to talk from a man's point of view about a visual that would be temptation. Based on what you've already told us, right? How do you take the recipe that you took from your father, your upbringing, the decision you made to be a great father? How do you apply that to your life as being a great husband and being a faithful husband?
Well, first, the young man that said that, yes, men are visual. Yes. But there's a characteristic that can ruin everything. It can ruin all men. I'm saying all men, and that's a lustful eye. That is something that can ruin you. A lustful eye. Now, I know that lust can ruin a relationship and a marriage. Why? Because for the simple fact is that when you marry and it's God ordained, God has given you a gift. You have
What's the gift? What's the gift, Chef? Tell us what the gift is.
your
We want the
wife.
gift.
Your wife.
Yes, yes.
It
He
says
that findeth a wife findeth a good thing.
right. Just for those who don't understand that, God gave Adam Eve, but Eve was suitable for Adam. And so when you find a wife, the wife that you find is suitable for you. But you know, you have to know yourself. So you know when you found the woman that's right for you. Because this is always gonna have ups and you're gonna have up days and down days. You're gonna have those.
Right.
But that woman
Right.
has to be for you. And so
Because
it's
marriage is not easy.
no, it's not. And so you have to search out for that woman for you. And when you find it, guess what? Everything that your heart desires, your flesh desires, she's gonna be ready for you.
But
She's gonna
even when you found the woman that's there, the right, say you do find the right woman, right? Say we, for people who do know, when you are equally yoked, right? You said
yep.
God gave Adam Eve, right? And she was suitable. Even when that is the case and you have a suitable mate, even when you do, there's still that visual that exists. How do you manage to continue to be faithful in your marriage? What is the recipe for fidelity? What is the recipe for that? Because some of us don't know.
You talking to look, Beth, you talking to a man who I'm remarried. So I'm speaking. I'm not speaking just what I think. I'm speaking what
Okay.
I know. Is that guess what? I was married. I wasn't ready when I got my first child, right? I was not the man I am today. So I really wasn't prepared to be a husband. But I was taught, I was raised when you have a child, get married. See? That's how I was raised. But as I grew and as I got older, as I grew in my relationship, I realized that listen, I gotta sort out God first, so I'll be
Right.
prepared for my wife. So how do men prepare themselves for their wife? That's what the relationship with God. So I got a divorce because guess what? I've done things lustful. I had sex behind my wife's back, and guess what? What did it
Your
do?
first wife, not your second wife. I don't
Of
want my
course,
sisters.
no, my first wife. I'm
Okay, no. Let's be specific because I don't want. No, I don't want sis calling me some sis. No,
oh no,
I don't want that.
but I'm talking
Your first
my
in your
first
first marriage, right?
right. But
Yeah,
guess what?
let's
We
get
talk
that
about we
position.
talk about lust though, lust, and that ruined it because guess what? God knew, she didn't know, and what did it?
Right.
What look? The enemy knew because of my ex, and this is why it's deep because guess what? Now he know how to attack me. And sure enough, me and her start arguing. We start fighting. We couldn't stand each other because guess what? I allowed my desire to ruin something that was supposed to be, but I didn't because of my flesh, because of my desire, the lustful desire. And so guess what? It was ruined. And so
Well, let
now,
me ask you, Chef. Let me
yeah,
ask you this before you complete that thought. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me ask you this because I had a conversation with a separate person, right? And I knew he was married. So I'm grateful for the marriage. I'm looking on like, oh my God, that is the thing to do. Like, I want to be married too. I want a husband. And most women do. Most women feel like I want to be in a space where I got a man that's just for me. That's my man. And then he's my husband, right? He gonna put a ring on it. I asked him, I said, so how's the married life? He goes, oh, it's good. I said, oh, how does it feel though? Like to dedicate yourself to one person. How does it feel to say to another person, I vow to be with you for the rest of my life and we gonna do this thing? He said to me, oh, just because I'm married doesn't mean my life stops. And I was like, excuse me, what? So I didn't know what to take from that. And then in a separate conversation with somebody different, I was asked, what do you think a healthy marriage looks like? And my response was, a healthy marriage looks like two people who are joined at the hip, right? Make a vow to each other with keeping intact all the vows for better, worse, richer, poor, sickness, health. Because those things are never described. We never get into it, but I'm gonna have you back on the show again to talk about for better, worse, richer, poor, and sickness and health because they all have different looks. They have different characteristics.
right,
All that stuff is different. But when I said that faithfulness, monogamy was one of the biggest pieces of marriage, that recipe that we were talking about earlier, what in your recipe says that I could be monogamous? Because when I mentioned that, the dude was like, "Oh, you want one of those impossible marriages?"
I'm
So I
like,
said, "Impossible? What do you mean impossible? Like, I want a man to be faithful to me. I want a man to love me and see me. Like, I know I'm not going to be young forever. I'm not going to keep this face and pieces of me forever. But once those vows set in, right? The expectation in most cases is you my man for life. What recipe do you have that you can share with other men that helps you maintain monogamy in your marriage?"
character, character, character. Because guess what? Everything that looks good, everything that shine, ain't good. You gotta, you know what I'm saying? So the character of that woman, you know, for me, it my woman, my wife, she had to be a God fearing woman. That was the senator. It could. That's it. I don't care about how bad she was. Hey, if she listen, if I found, let's keep it real, fellas. Let's keep it real. The eye of the beholder. What I say look good to me. It may not look good for Jeff. It may not look good for Ronnie. It may not
Right,
look good. So that's why the dude said visual. What looked good for me may not look good for him. What his
right,
desires may not be the same as mine. But guess what? For me was she had to be a woman of faith. True. I had to get to know her. I had to make sure that she was a woman of faith, not some of this, oh, I go to church and that's it.
right.
Why? Because in that relationship, when you allow God to be the center, guess what? It works. It lasts. Yes. And look, I'm muted. Honest, transparency.
Unmuted,
Look, listen.
unafraid, and unapologetic.
Hey, look. Doesn't mean that my wife is the best looking, but she the best looking for me, right? There's other women out there that look good, yeah. But you know what keep me focused and saying, nah, I ain't gonna do none of that because the punishment, the consequence
The
of me
consequence.
lusting for another woman I'm already married, guess what? Is unbearable. I don't want to bear that. I don't want to go through that pain, that suffering. It could cause a lifetime of pain. Guess what? Nah, I work hard to get what I got. So I share it with my wife. So why would I want to go ruin that? And guess what? She can get everything. She can get half alimony. Not what? Nah. I'm married for life. That's it. And let death do us part. That's it. So that's what keep me rooted. Cause I don't want that pain. I don't want that
Right.
type of how we said. I don't want that type of smoke. Nah. I don't
Word.
want
Because I'm gonna tell you, marriage is not easy, right? And the purpose of having you on the show today was because I'm married too, and marriage is not easy. And I could talk about marriage from a woman's perspective, right? I could definitely say that, but I think it's important in this space because there are situations where men are your visual, what temptation looks like, right? Like you said, God gave Eve to Adam. Even though there was another woman in the space, there was another thing in the space that tempted him, and that's where they lost ground. But in today's time, women want consistency. Women want consistency. And sometimes that's hard to find because there's so many people out here that won't say no. Nobody fights for what it is they're in. But there's a recipe for staying in a space where people can communicate. Do you think that communication is a big part of holding things together and keeping things grounded? Do you feel like communication, like the communication that you have with your daughter, the communication that you have with your wife, do you feel like that's a big part of the recipe that keeps your moral compass in play?
yes, dedication. Like you said, consistent. You gotta be consistent with it. How do we be consistent with it? It requires that communication is key, but being consistent in your devotion, your vows, honor,
Right.
respect. Those are morals. Like if you're not a moral, you got that lines up with one another. Are your morals
Right.
the same? You understand what I'm saying? That's key. Then you'll know. Look, I can't speak for nobody else but myself. But seriously, like just think about when you look at relationships and marriages, right? Some people want to
Right.
say marriages is the same as is relationships. Nah,
No.
it's totally different.
Yes.
That's what the world tell you. Oh, it's the same. Nah, it's not the same. Don't put me in a
Yeah,
category with
it's
somebody
very different.
having a relationship and I'm married. Nah, it's different. Because guess what? I'm devoted to that one woman. In a relationship, you can actually leave. But no, guess what? I gotta stick it out. I gotta get in the trenches. Well, we gotta get in the trenches together. But in a relationship, you can leave, you can walk away with nothing. But see, in a marriage, guess what? Nah, it ain't what they want to say. The government in it. Nah, there's so many other ways you could do it without getting the government in your marriage. But still, at the end
Right.
of the day, when you married to that woman under God, oh nah, trust me, it ain't that simple. And especially if that woman is a God fearing woman and you a God fearing man, oh God gonna get
Right.
both of y'all, both of you. So listen, you step out on your marriage, and God know it. I promise you, it's gonna be pain, it's gonna be suffering. You're gonna wish you never did it. And so,
But let me ask you this though, Chef, right? Because I used to work with a lot of men, and all those guys were fit. So I know in part of this, we were talking about the recipe for marriage, fatherhood, and fitness. I know for a fact that when again, this ain't harping on the brothers because I love y'all. I love y'all. But I know when y'all put your mind to something, you do it. I know a lot of people, a lot of men who said to themselves, I'm going to be fit. I've watched them develop a routine where they would go to the gym. They would buy creatine. They would buy all these supplements to make sure that they would stay in shape. They would do the protein fit. They would do the diets. They would go to the gym 3-4 times a week. They have a repetition. They work on the biceps, triceps, and then they work on legs. They do squats. They that is the discipline that men are known for. You guys are known to discipline yourselves for the things that you want. How is it? Well, I don't want to say how is it, right? But how can you take from that space where you are a fitness buff, right? Because I know you go to the gym, you work out, you go to the gym 3 times a week, you got your little routine going on. How do you take from that space of discipline and apply it to the rest of your life?
easy, consistency. You want to see a result? Consistent. You got to be consistent in it. And it's crazy we talking like that because I just was on my podcast and I got to be more focused on my diet. Oh, can I go in the gym? I can lift the gym up, but my diet is poor, and so that's a mental thing, And so it's something constant you got to work at. But can I?
So
I
what
go to
so
I
what you
go.
say your diet being poor, what do you think it will take for your diet to improve?
Just constantly
Would
working
you
on my
would you say it was
mind.
discipline? Would you
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but not only that, just working on my mind, my heart. You know what I'm saying? And my strengthening my relationship with God constantly.
right,
That change because guess what? In the relationship with God, you got to be disciplined. Got to be obedient. We look in the black community, our bodies talks to us, and we reject it. It tells us,
right,
hey, they ain't supposed to
right,
be in there. And what we do, we still doing. I give hey, look, I'll keep it real. Look,
right,
when
right,
I used to drink heavy, right?
right, right,
Your
right,
your sides start hurting. You know what that come from? Dehydration. But we still yeah, I'm getting drunk. Yeah. But now your body telling you, hey, stop taking that. I can't take it no more. Boom. Now later on in life, we have these issues.
yeah,
But our body's already
yes,
telling us. And that's so and so Same way we be consistent about drinking and partying, the same attitude, the same
Right.
mentality you gotta have in having that relationship. You gotta be consistent in it. And consistency shows growth. And in growth, it gets you stronger. So
Right.
without that, that's in relationship, that's in marriages, because guess what? It's levels. Before you get into a
Yes.
marriage, you gotta have a relationship with that person.
Right.
Then after you get into that relationship, you get to learn and then you move to marriage. But it's a process. It's levels to that. It's levels to that relationship
Yeah.
because the ultimate goal is to be married. That's for some. Some people don't have a desire to get married, and I respect that. But for
Right.
me and mine, guess what? I want my daughters to get married, but I want my daughters to pick the right man. And guess what? I am the example of what a husband's supposed to be and a father. So how did I do that? I was consistent in my relationship with my daughter.
And you held yourself accountable.
Of course. So if I do something wrong, my daughter's looking at me and say, "Well, Dad, how you gonna tell me not to do this and you doing it?" So nah, and I don't want to hear that. That's just me. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear nobody saying, "Oh, well, you can't do this and you doing this." Nah. So I'm always mindful how I do, how I speak to them, my character,
Right.
what what they see in me. They say, I like Daddy. I love my dad because he do this, he do that, and so that's a real recipe right there for you. And some people don't want it
Right.
because guess what, Beth? Some people don't want that relationship. Why? Because you got to be consistent. You got to
Yes.
be obedient.
Yes. You have to have discipline and hold yourself accountable. But you know what I find in most cases, and this is for men and women, right? I feel like the moment that someone starts pointing the finger at us, right? And someone says, you shouldn't do that. We take those words in consideration. And then the moment that we're about to apply that advice or the recommendations or suggestions to our lives, just when we're about to say, oh, all right, they might be right, we flip that thing around and go, well, how you going to tell me when you're, and then we don't learn the lesson. And that's what pushes us into a space where we have to learn a harder
Yeah.
lesson. And like you said earlier, but you don't want to be in a space where you're divorced. Not that you don't love your wife, not that you don't believe in the sanctity of marriage, not that you don't believe in that institution. There are consequences, and them consequences say, bump you, pay me,
Right.
right? So even for people who don't have God, even for people who don't believe in God, even for atheists and people who are saying, oh, God is not the space that I dwell in. Even for those people, when they have to consider that they're not holding themselves accountable in a space where they should have a good recipe for being a good husband or a good father or a good person with moral character, accountability should be the thing that they resort to, because in that space it's like, well, if I'm not doing it for anybody else, I should at least be doing it for me.
Hey Beth, when you were saying it, right, I was just thinking about this. This is what came to my mind when you said that, right? What goes around comes around.
Right.
So a man that's in a relationship with a woman and he decides to cheat, know this: what you do to one person, somebody will do it to you. And so if you okay with that, you cool with that, men. If you cool with sleeping with all these women and you in a relationship or a marriage, guess what? When it comes back to you, it's not gonna be the same. The
Yeah.
punishment not gonna be the same. The
Yeah.
consequence not gonna be the same. It's gonna be different, and you're gonna feel differently. And so that's another reason too why I stay rooted, because guess what? I'm me. I'm telling me. I can only talk for me. I ain't trying to hear that. My wife told me she's sleeping with another man. Oh no, sir. I'm well out. That's the flesh. That's the flesh talking. But I know
Right.
that's why I say, let me stay faithful, because I don't want to deal with that. There are men that's cool with that. But guess what? When you have that daughter, hey, know this: you been a dog all your life. Now you got this daughter, and you talking about, oh, I love my daughter, I love my daughter, and next thing you know, oh, remember all the time you was a dog? Remember all the time you was doing all this with these women? Now, guess what? Now your daughter gonna get that. That's not fair
Right.
because it's a selfish act to say I'm gonna be with this person, then I'm gonna be with another person. That's selfish. That's a
What do you say to
character.
a guy who doesn't? So what do you say to a guy who doesn't have a daughter? What do you say to a guy who doesn't have any children? He's like, I'm out here sowing my oats, and I like this. And here's why I'm asking you this: I knew a person of another race, and this is not, I'm not making this racial, but I knew a person of another race who would tell me, oh yeah, I like dating black women because you guys don't get much. I can date you and take you out on a date. As long as I open the door and pay for dinner, it's all systems go. So there are some people, and I know some brown men who kind of feel the same way. I'll never get married because there are benefits in being single and dating people who are always different, spontaneous, have something different to offer. In this commitment, in this space where the guy doesn't have the same commitments that you have to be a great father. How can you encourage him to be a great husband or good boyfriend, like a moral character?
But Beth, but check this out though. What you just said. Even if they in a religion, I mean not a religion, even if they're in a relationship. Watch this. I don't care. This is for real. This is a fact. I do not care if you in a relationship, if you are focused on one woman and you go sleep with another woman behind her back, that is a selfish act because this woman may really like you. Now you ruin her because you messed her up mentally and physically because she cares for you and you're not showing her the same care that she's giving you. That's selfish. And so when you just they just thinking about themselves, that's a selfish act. And it shows about their integrity, it shows about their character. They may get upset, but that's the reality of it. Because guess what? Women are precious. And they so now I ain't just saying this because I got daughters. I'm not no.
We are precious. You're
Right,
right.
but watch this. There are women that do the same thing as men, right? But that comes from what? That comes from being hurt. That comes from trauma. And so because they have some type of trauma, they act out on that trauma. But at the end of the day, guess what? If you're gonna be with a woman, be with one woman. Guess what? If you not, don't just get her hopes up high that you gonna marry her. You know, a lot of men date women and don't marry them. They sleep in the
Yes.
same house. They play house, but they ask yourself, women, this: why aren't this man asking to marry me? Because he don't
Well,
love me that much.
there's a new thing. Not to get off topic, because this is going to veer to the left a little bit. But there's a whole new thing. Have you heard of the hospice wife?
No, I never heard of that. What's that?
So, um, in theory, there are men who have lived their entire lives being whoever they wanted to be. Now they become a man of age, and now they're looking for either a young woman or a woman seeking marriage, marry her so that she can take care of them in their age of need. And the name, theoretically, is hospice. It's a hospice wife. I'm gonna marry you to make sure I'm taken care of. There's a lot of people, statistically, a lot of men showing up in senior homes who don't have wives, who don't have any family to take, never had children, never had a wife, never had a serious relationship. There's always been in a situationship, and now there's a thing, hospice wives. And that's what this topic was important because, you know, we all deserve love. We all deserve to be in a situation where someone is taking pouring into us and we're pouring back into them. And it seems like if we don't check our egos, right? Again, I'm not pointing fingers at a man, but if you don't check your ego, you don't check your pride, you don't have discipline, there is no moral compass. You cannot make a commitment. There's an excuse for every time that you should be monogamous. You don't have the motivation to stay in a relationship, you never transform. And if you don't transform and you stay in the same place, if you don't transform and build your faith, if that's your thing, if you don't transform and see the light, a hospice wife might be the space that you have to be in because you couldn't commit to anything but yourself. And that's why I asked you for the recipe. The recipe can maybe, encourage some young man or some man or some person who knows that marriage is not easy. Fatherhood is not easy. Being disciplined in the gym is not easy. And you've told us that you are a man of faith. That's not easy. It takes commitment. And that's why this recipe is important, because you've found one. You've found a recipe that helps you stay committed to all four spaces of your life.
Beth, we saying recipe, right? And now this is right up the alley of me being a chef, right?
I know.
Watch this.
This is your topic. That's why this is your topic.
Here's the nutshell right here for you. Watch this. For the ones who know how to cook, the ones who don't know how to cook, right? I'm about to cook something up right now. You ready?
Give it to us
right now, yo.
I've been waiting for this moment. I was waiting for the oxy to come in and be like, "Yeah, go ahead, do it."
There is a base in every recipe. A base. There is a start in that recipe. If you're going to make a cake, that has a base. If you want a chocolate cake, it has a base. And guess what? Without that base, you can't make the cake. What is the base of the cake? What is the base of the meat? It's not the meat is not the base. It's the seasoning. Without the seasoning, the food is bland. It's nothing. And so, guess what? We're talking about faith. We're talking about working out. We're talking about fatherhood. Right. Christ is the base. When you don't have that, it's all discombobulated. It's all discombobulated. That is the base of being a good father. That is the base of being a good husband. Even having discipline to work out. That is the base. That is the key ingredient into all three. Whether they believe in Allah, Buddha, I said Christ. I respect whatever you believe. But guess what? In that, right there, Christ is the center. It's not, and I say this to respect everybody's beliefs.
Right.
You got to understand. Whatever you believe, right?
Yes.
Does it line up?
Your religious belief is the base of your foundation.
Does it line up? Because guess what?
Right.
A man that has a wife, guess what? His journey in his marriage is different than mine because of his character, because of his beliefs, his upbringing. You see what I'm saying? So all those play a part in it. But here's the key component. That's the relationship with Christ. It teaches you character. It teaches you morals, responsibility, accountability, responsibility, devotion, dedication. Not manipulation. No. I mean, not that. Because that's what some people do, want to manipulate. No, not that. Sorry.
That's the biggest thing. Because manipulation is one of the things the Beth B Shift loves talking about unhealthy behaviors, and manipulation is one of them. Because some people get into these situations and they don't want a wife. They want to pretend that they want someone. They want to mate. They want to pretend they come in with pride. They come in with there's no humility. They come in with with this idea that I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you, and let's not talk about somebody that got their whole life together. They're going, I don't want to put a label on what people have aspired to be, but they got, they start making this big money, like you said in the beginning, that you had this big head. Sometimes that big head makes a man or any person feel like, oh, I'm better than them.
Yeah.
I'm in a better situation. I chose you. And because I chose you, you got to come to me. And this is how you're going to come to me. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't set a standard, right? There should be a standard. There should be a standard.
Yeah.
But that standard should be without judgment. That standard should be without pride. That standard should be without, I'm going to make you feel like this because in my head, I'm that. And because we have all these, we've had these tests, you did talk about Christ, how he is like the part of your foundation. He's the base of any ingredient that starts the process for any meal, any relationship, any marriage, any commitment, where we are serving our purpose in that marriage or as a father or whatever our situation is. If there was one thing that you could give, like one piece of advice that you could give to any person, so that they could start putting the ingredients together for their own recipe, what would it be?
Surrender. Surrender. Surrender
Surrender to
to God. I'm talking about total surrenders, because guess what? That's a renewal mind. And so you begin to change. You start to look at life differently. You start to speak differently, act different. Your character starts to change, and so that's where it starts right there. You want to change? That's where it starts at right there, because we all have had trauma. We all have hurt, unforgiveness. And so when you begin to start to forgive yourself, you begin to forgive others, because there's so many people that's hurting people and they don't even forgive. And we always say hurt people hurt people. So
hurt people.
if you want a successful, you want a happy, healthy marriage or a relationship that turns into a marriage, guess what? Any trauma, any hurt, you got to get rid of that. Because if you got any hurt and any residue that's left over from a previous relationship, a previous marriage, you're gonna bring that into your marriage.
Absolutely.
And it's going to
and
hinder.
that's a bad recipe because it's not gonna mix well.
Not going. You going into a new marriage, new relationship. It's got to be new,
Renewing of the
new
mind.
and changed.
Absolutely. I will say this though. I'm a lover of Christ myself. I love him to death. But I've also been in spaces where people can't get to God because he's been weaponized, right? God has been in spaces where people have used him as a weapon. People have pointed a finger at other people saying, God's going to get you and you're not going to heaven. You're not going to do this. And in some cases, that may be the truth. But I feel, right, that some of us turn people who could possibly come to Christ or come to have a religious base. Or, no, I don't want to say religious, but have a spiritual base. Because I'm not religious and I don't buy into religious beliefs, but I do have a spiritual base, right? I do love the Lord. I know that there's a higher power, the supreme being, and Christ is my savior. I got that all day. But there's some people who don't have that. And there's some people who won't come by way of that yet because they were introduced to him in such a way that made them feel like they could never amount to anything that he would ever want from them. If you could offer some piece of advice to a person who could possibly come to Christ or possibly, love on him or possibly see that there's a new light that could gear in that direction, where could they start though? Before they even come to God, where could they start? What could they say to themselves that would make them say, okay, I'm in a space, this is the space, I don't want to be here, I can do better. How could you guide them before they even get to have a spiritual belief?
I got you. So this for anybody that do not believe, period, right? Watch this. I serve a God I cannot see. I believe and trust that He is God Almighty that can change every situation.
Right.
So my thing would to that person would be pray to God, and guess what? In praying to God, open your heart to receive Him and hear Him. See, that's the key. Opening your heart. That's a. It's not visual. It's spiritual.
Right.
You have to open your heart, visual. Speak to Him, visual. Because guess what? And that's where it starts. It's an open relationship between you and God, and you have to open your heart to receive Him. It's not natural. It's not visual because God is not visual. But you have to. You don't know Him. You got to get to know Him. That's between you and Him, and it's praying to Him and actually talking to Him in your
Right.
comfort of your home, in your car, at your workplace, privately, not openly, because it's personal. And so that's what I would tell a person that don't know, that don't know, that could go to God. It's personal because it's a personal relationship for me. It's a personal relationship for you. So it's not only personal. Watch this. It's private. So what you say to God is between you and God, not to
Absolutely.
man, not to your mother, not to your father, not to. It's private and it's personal. And
Right.
if you open up your heart, trust me, trust me, not trust me. Just if you ain't never tried it, try it. And the key thing is opening up your heart, and that's personal, intimate, and that's just between you and God.
Before we get up out of here, I would like to say this. I would like to say, you know, the media, social media, the way we live today, the things that are offered to us, it offers a different perspective, and none of it screams God. None of it says, there's a God, there's a higher power. None of it. It all says you've got to look like this. People take 1,000 photos before they post one, so they have the best position, so it makes themselves look great and look grand. There's so many challenges that everybody has met at this point in time because there's so many other things that look great. There are things that look beautiful. Some people are not looking for a higher power because in their minds they are the power. So, I agree with you, Chef. If someone is looking, if we identify that we're in a space where we're unhappy, and if we come from a background where there's a religious belief, or we come from a background where there's a spiritual belief, test it out. If we come from a space and we don't understand it, or we don't look inside yourself and see that you can or want to affect change. And in that space, I believe that's where some people may find and resort to looking to a higher power. But before we even get there, I think we have to know that change is necessary. And that the ingredients for a good recipe starts with a good moral compass. We agree?
Oh yeah,
I like that. Chef, I thank you so much for coming on. To all the our listeners who tuned in and watched us, we truly, truly appreciate you. You guys know Chef is family around here. It will not be the last time he is on. We'll have something else to talk about because there's so many pieces of him that we need to discuss. Chef, you are the host of From the Battle to the Glory. Please, guys, make sure you go and watch his podcast. He is on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 6:30, and you can catch him on YouTube. I love you, Chef. I thank you guys for tuning in. And until we speak again, you guys stay grounded.